Hello and welcome to the Flix Forum podcast, where each episode we go back and we look at a Netflix original film in the order of release. This episode we have Netflix 218th film from 2020. It's the Spanish thriller The Occupant, or Hogar. It's directed by David and Alex Pastor, and it stars Javier Gutierrez, Mario Casas, and Bruna Cusi. I am Jesse, and I am here solo for this international feature, The Occupant. If you're interested in this film, if you've seen something about it and you wanted to check it out, give us a pause now because I'm going to spoil this film. I think this film will probably be best if you know very little about it, because it does have quite a few spoilers and threads and sort of reveals along the way. So that's it. Let's get into it. This is the Fast Flix, where we do a quick little summary of what it's all about. So this one is about a man dealing with no longer being able to provide for his family and the lengths that he might go to ensure he gets what he wants. I don't know, that's a little bit of a rant there at the end. It's an interesting concept, so I'm not going to say too much more. I'm going to talk a little bit about how this one ended up on Netflix. So this was slated for a March 2020 release and a world premiere at the Malaga Spanish Film Festival, but the event was postponed because of the COVID-19 pandemic disruption. This was filmed from the 25th of November 2018 till the 12th of April 2019. So that's quite a long, I'm guessing they probably had some breaks throughout that production time. It was released on Netflix worldwide on the 20th of March of 2020. And it was filmed in and across Barcelona in Spain. It was nominated for 3 awards: for Best Actor at the Cinema Writers Circle Awards and the Feroz Awards for Javier. And also, it was nominated for Best Visual Effects at the Gaudi Awards. So, very interesting there. I guess a lot of local awards there for a Spanish film. This one was, I guess we could say, the title in Spanish is Hogar. And it, in the literal translation, it means home. But it's not a literal translation, apparently, in the Spanish language, because it's like a sensation about a place of one, or a place where someone truly belongs. So it makes the title of The Occupant feel a lot more impactful when you think about that, because the Occupant title, it loses a lot in that translation. If Hogar means home, then that is what this film was about a home that a man is trying to put together for his family. Translations across the world for this one: in Spanish it's called Hogar, obviously is home. The title in Canada is Tenet, as well as in Brazil, Finland, France, Mexico, Sweden, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates. In Germany, it's called Your Home Is Mine. In Greece, it's I Still Have the Keys, which is quite funny if you've seen this film. In Italy, it's Where Is Your House? In Japan, it's Inhabitants. And in Portugal, To Live As You Deserve, or To Life You Deserve. So, interesting bunch of titles, all fit in really well. A nice rounded, a lot of titles there. I really like that. So, let's talk about the consensus. What are critics and audiences saying about this film? On Rotten Tomatoes, it sits on a 61% on 23 reviews. That means it's fresh. The audience, a little bit lower, on 46%, and that's on more than 100 ratings. We go to IMDb, so 6.4 out of 10 on nearly 18,000 ratings, which is extremely, good for an international film, I think. And a 6.4 is a solid score. And on Letterboxd, it sits just below a 3 on a 2.9 out of 5. That's on nearly 12,500 ratings. So for an international feature, this one's actually had quite a few eyeballs, which is good to see. And that leads to my early thoughts. I think that this is super engaging. I was hanging on to every thread, waiting for the end to happen, I guess. And when the end did come, I wasn't disappointed. I really enjoyed it. I liked the ending of this one. So let's get into the characters of this one. So we've got Javier plays the character Javier, and this is a once successful advertising agent who can't afford his apartment anymore. He's got to pack up his family home and leave, and he's sort of obsessed with the superficial, like the idea of him losing this house. It's almost kills him. He has a son who he isn't impressed with the size of his son, sort of thinks he's a little bit overweight, and sort of makes him go on runs until he vomits. He sits there and watches television just so he can watch the ads, so he can look at the commercials and look at the commercial side of things. And he can't deal with this new middle class lifestyle that he's been forced into because of not having the monetary means to keep that high flyer life going. He wants the life that he thinks he deserves. And there's this character, Thomas, who moves into his old house, who, it's the portrait of what he wants. And it's pretty crazy the lengths he ends up going to get what he wants. Try not to spoil it too much. I think that leads into Thomas, the dad, the husband of the new family that move into Javier's old house. We find out early on that, his past hasn't necessarily been the best. He's sort of had issues with alcohol, some drink driving issues. But the money side of things is all well and good. He's got a good job because of the riches of his wife's father. And he feels guilt and fear and helplessness for the prior mistakes that he's had, and he wants to do the right thing. And coming across Javier is probably not the best thing for his journey to renewal. And Lara is Thomas's wife, so Javier is almost a little bit jealous. He sees her as like the perfect wife. She's a wife who stands by her man no matter what the mistakes he makes, and she does good deeds. Her job, she works pro bono to help those in need, so he really looks up to her, and you can see early on the draw from her that he feels towards her. And then we talk, I guess, about Javier's wife, Marga, who, she's really focused on their son, Danny, and looks out for him a lot. He's being bullied at school, and she's trying to support him, but she's not feeding this information back to Javier, and that makes him feel a little bit left out. And she's also under the illusion that Javier is going to school to better his career so he can get some more jobs, because, as I mentioned before, Javier is sort of a little bit older, so he's not getting a lot of these jobs that he would have used to get. And, this school or this class that he's going to sort of, he loses a little bit of interest in it as his focus turns more towards Thomas and his family. The directors of this one, Alex and David Pasta, interesting. They've directed a few Spanish and films and TV, but I think the biggest thing to take out of their writing credits, they wrote the film Selfless, which you may have seen, that stars Ryan Reynolds and Ben Kingsley. So they're not too far removed from Hollywood in the fact that they've got some good writing credits behind them. Okay, let's talk about some scenes. What are some scenes that I enjoyed in this film? I think it's hard. It's hard in a film like this to sort of identify things that really stand out, because it's just sort of a draw throughout the whole thing about this character and his motivations behind trying to get a life back that he wants. So the opening and the closing are sort of really good parallels to start off with, because the opening shot is this old advertising campaign that Javier had worked on in the past, probably the 1980s, I guess. And it's sort of this appliance commercial where you've got the perfect family, the perfect house. And what he does from now on in the film is to try and get this for himself, get it back for himself, because he starts off with it and he loses it. And the end of the film has a bit of a mirror shot of this advertising commercial, and I really liked that to draw a close to this film. So keep an eye out for that. I think the moment that Javier has to leave this nice house and go live in the middle class sort of area, the poorer area, instead of this nice beautiful view looking out over the city that he's used to, it's sort of a billboard that represents that same nice view, but instead of an actual view, it's this view of a billboard. So I thought that was well done. I think that we talk about Javier as a character, and the parts that I didn't necessarily like him making his son run until he vomits, but when he was living in the nicer part of town, he was able to go for a run in the middle of the night, enjoy that exercise. Whereas, in the middle class, he's got to, when he goes with his son, he's got to go up these big hills, and it's a real struggle. And this sort of reflects the struggles that he's facing with his career, with his life, with his family life. I think there's a moment where Javier breaks into his old apartment, and he's having this, going in there every now and then, checking things out. And Lara, the wife of Thomas that lives there now, sort of comes home because she forgot something. And there's quite a suspenseful scene as he tried to keep himself hidden from her, which was cool. And I think that the sort of twist at the end with Marga, Thomas's wife, sort of explaining that she knows what's happened, I think this is really important for that newfound confidence that we're seeing in Javier. He's so confident in what he's saying. He doesn't fear anything. He's happy where he's at. It's just a good transition from a character that we've seen struggle and be rejected so many times that now he's got the upper hand. So a nice little finish to the film there as well. The only thing that I'm going to put in here that I didn't like was this gardener that worked at their old place. He sort of blackmails Javier along the way. He's creepy. I'm not sure we needed his blackmail, and I'm not sure that the reasons he was blackmailing, which were some pretty disgusting habits, were really needed. So I think that probably needed a rework, and that didn't really work for me in that case. That leads us to the themes and ideas of this film, and I think there's a lot in this. There's a lot that they're trying to say. What do people deserve? We've got the haves, we've got the have-nots, which sort of leads a little bit into class society too. You've got entitlement and this economic disparity of depending on who's got the money, where you are, depends on where you live, depends on what your life is like. And especially in Javier's case, his age is definitely something which impacts his ability to be successful now. He's not getting jobs anymore. He's seeing a reflection of what life used to be like for him and his family through this new family that's living in his apartment. They're a younger family. They're doing well. He's not. His wife's working like retail, and he's having to try and sell his car and continually go for appointments, go back to school. And in saying that, all these interviews that Javier does go to, they're all run by younger people, younger up-and-coming people, and he feels threatened by this youth. And we even see a conversation with his son where he talks about, when I was at school, I had to learn Latin. It shows times have changed. Latin's not this language that everyone studies anymore. I reckon I've even had my own father talk about when he studied Latin at school, and it's like, I don't even know if that's an option anymore. So all very interesting. And then also too, we've got this sort of monetary crisis, or this idea that you have to let people go from their jobs. You've got maids, you've got gardeners having to downsize due to lower income. So the idea that the impact that this can have on society too. And then on the other side of things, especially through this sort of Alcoholics Anonymous or rehab sort of sessions that we see, there's that idea of temptation too. Trying to fight that temptation, trying to keep your guard up. And then that idea also of being tempted, of getting back what you've lost. What lengths will you go to get back what you've lost? So all really interesting little things that are touched on in this film too. I think things that I took away from this one, I think that there's this idea of a tap dripping in this film. There's this tap in their middle-class house that drips, and we also see it again at the end. And I think it's a really good symbol showing that it doesn't matter how nice your house is or how good your life is, there's always going to be a problem. There's always going to be issue. There's always going to be something that impacts things. So I think that was really interesting too. We usually talk about IMDb, if there's anyone that we jumped on to check out. I didn't for this film, so I sort of got a couple of quotes from critics about this film, which I think are an interesting take. So I really like this quote. I'm not saying that I agree with it, but I like this quote from Empire Film Magazine. They said, if you feel that if Javier poured the same creativity into his advertising portfolio as he does with his cunning plans, he'd be effing Don Draper, which is quite funny. I think that, when he goes to interviews, sort of show that he's living off his past and not necessarily anything that he's done that's new, whereas he is quite thoughtful or quite imaginative in his things that he does to try and get back what he wants. So that's a really interesting quote. And then this one from the New York Times, not quite as good, but they said, if Javier put as much effort into his portfolio as he does into evil, he'd have a sports car for every day of the week. Yeah, I mean, not as good as the previous one, but still talks about, the effort that he does put into what he's trying to do. I'm not necessarily sure that I see Javier as evil. I think probably a misguided man, and obviously as a character you can look at him towards the end and work out he actually goes through with something that is not quite nice. But I don't know whether that's evil. Maybe that's the fear of loss and trying to regain what he's lost, and not necessarily that he's a real pure evil man, because he does look out for Lara, and he wants to be successful with her and the kids. So it's very interesting. I'm going to wrap this one up. I think time for my final thoughts. Give the films a rating out of 5, and I feel like this film does need to be recommended. I think that the extremes that Javier goes to, it might be, they might be a little bit extreme and a little bit unbelievable, but it's always engaging watching someone fall into a spiral because of their perception of the world and what they do to regain where they're at. I'm giving this a 3.5 out of 5, so decent score from me. I think it's worth a watch. Check it out if you can. We have socials. We have Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. So on social media this week, I want to ask, what's the most disappointed you've ever been after an interview? That's just in relation to Javier kind of missing out on a lot of interviews, I guess. I can't even think of anything off the top of my head that I've gone for that I was disappointed I didn't get. But I'm sure there's some good stories about, issues that have happened with that. So if you've got one you want to share, please do. We've got a huge catalogue of Netflix films. Please do have a look and see if there's anything we've done that you're interested in. We will be back next week with another brand new episode. And this one is also from 2022. It's also an international film. This one's from Canada. It's an action thriller called The Decline, or in French, it's Jockey Decline, and it's directed by Patrice Lebert. It stars Guillermo Lorin, Rial Bose, Marc-Andre Grondin, and Marie-Eveline Lassard. So, The Decline. That's what we're looking at next week. I'm excited. Action thriller. Should be interesting. thanks for listening along for this episode on The Occupant, or if you're speaking in Spanish, Hogar, which I like that title. It makes a lot of sense. I'll be back next week and see you then.